only open when the session's in.
And then you found out that they don't actually exist for the press corps.
Yeah, yeah. they're-
Can I, before we start unrolling, I'm gonna go.
Okay.
We have his name and title here.
yeah, do you mind saying your name and title again?
Sure. Brian Durham, Executive Director at the Illinois Community College Board.
You mind spelling that too? Just so.
BRIANDURHAM.
Got it. All right. So, cool. All right, so I'll just give a very, very short intro here before we
Okay.
get started here. But 3, 2, welcome back. We're now going to take a look at one bill that has passed out of the Senate and is now onto the House, and it has to do with community colleges and how their credits transfer to four-year public institutions. Joining us now is Brian Durham, Executive Director of the Illinois Community College Board. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So this is something that would have a very big impact on students. I know people who have had this issue where they take a course that would be able to transfer to their major at a four-year institution, but just because of the way that credits transfer between a community college and a four-year institution, it doesn't actually count, and they have to take that class all over again. As I understand it, this bill would just put those credits on an even level and stop that discrepancy from happening.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we really have a great transfer system on the general education side. If you take a general education course, it transfers as the same course. But in the space around major courses, so if you take a Chemistry 200 at a community college and you go on to a university, they can give you elective credit, they can require you to take that course over, and all we're trying to do is really even the playing field here. If you take it at a community college, you should get credit for the equivalent course at the university.
So where is the disconnect happening there? Is that the four-year institution saying you have to take this course here, and the state, this bill would have the state step in and change that? Or is this a state requirement that is keeping the four-year institutions from not counting this credit equally?
I mean, the four-year institutions are making the decision, and ultimately it will go sometimes all the way to the department level, but they're looking at an individual student's transcript. You have somebody who evaluates that, and they're ultimately deciding whether or not the course meets the same standards. And what's unique about this system is we're really talking about major courses that go through the Illinois Articulation Initiative, where those courses are reviewed by faculty that are community colleges and universities in partnership, determined to have the same outcomes, determined the syllabi look largely the same. I mean, they have to cover the same material. They're getting a code that's showing their equivalent, but then on the major side, they're still getting to universities and not being put in those equivalent slots. And that just doesn't make any sense because they are being vetted. It's not willy-nilly any course out there. I mean, there's still lots of institutional decision-making here, but these are vetted courses that have already been shown to meet these same outcomes.
Is this something that a student will traditionally find out about when they're making the transfer, or will they go into those courses at the community college understanding that this may not transfer to a four-year institution if they move on?
I mean, I think students typically go in thinking these courses are going to transfer, and they find these things out as they make that leap from the community college to the four-year.
So when we talk about community colleges and the role they serve in higher education and the entire higher education system as a whole, a lot of students go for those first couple of years just to it's maybe a cheaper option before they move on. They can find out if they really want that major that they were thinking they want to pursue, but it's just more affordable outright. But if there's that confusion about whether or not what they're doing at the community college will transfer correctly, do you worry that that takes away from not the legitimacy, but the sort of when students are deciding when they go to college that community college is really an option if they don't know if those credits are going to transfer correctly?
Well, I think community colleges are on average are about, you look at the statewide average, about 70% cheaper than going to universities when you look at tuition and fees, public universities, and more so even when you get beyond the publics. But it certainly has an impact on that affordability. I mean, there's the potential that a student has to take more courses. There is the potential that a student would, not be able to choose particular electives that they feel they need in their program because they're having to fill those with that major course and then taking the exact same material over again. So I think it could have an impact. And I mean, ultimately, there's so much work happening in the state about making the transition seamless for students. Well, we've got MAP dollars dedicated, significant investments in MAP last year and in the governor's budget this year. We've worked hard on making dual credit more accessible for high school students. I mean, for transfer students, this really closes the loop. You get gen ed, you get to transfer all your gen eds, and you would get to transfer those majors, so you come in really at the same level of students who start at the university.
You already mentioned those investments. Governor Pritzker's made it clear what he wants to see for higher education funding. He's actually been touring the state the past couple of weeks just to talk about those investments, and a lot of that has to do with MAP grants. And when he gave his budget address, he said, combined with federal Pell grants and MAP grants, there are going to be a significant number of students in the state that would be able to go to community college for free after those grants. Do you see that as a solid goal, or something that is achievable with this kind of investment? And how would that advance community colleges in the state's whole higher education system?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, I mean, the governor's message is clear. He wants to take MAP dollars, you combine those with Pell, and you create essentially for low and middle income students the opportunity to get the first 2 years for free. And you do that through combining financial aid through our existing mechanisms. It just makes community colleges, and I think really emphasizes the important position they play in the system. Community colleges attract more and tend to serve more underserved populations, diverse populations, minorities, low income, first generation. So with these investments, we create a pipeline for those students to go from 2-year to 4-year. And so this bill helps with that transition as well. I mean, it helps build on that pipeline.
Was it all of those additional investments that are being talked about now that made you feel like this is the environment to try to get this bill through now? When we're talking about, changing the way that a 4-year institution sees community college credits in that way. I mean, that would be a very significant step in the higher education system in the state. Do you just feel like this is now the time, or why hasn't this been attempted, or if it has been attempted, why didn't it happen before?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, there have been attempts before. There have been organizational, across the state agencies that work in this, conversations about how to do this. There's been a lot of work done. But ultimately, I think you hit it right on the head. The environment's right. We're thinking about how do we make the transition more seamless? How do we make it more affordable? How do we reach students that need this assistance most? And affordability and all that's huge, of course. But ultimately, we also have to make them set up a system where they don't have to take a lot of extra credits, where they can clearly see their path. And this just helps us do that and positions community colleges where they ought to be.
All right, well, Brian Durham, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. Cool.